All right, ladies and gentlemen, today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working on how to do the hair. And the hair should be one of the last parts that we're focused on. The idea behind the hair is essentially that it's going to take a lot of our pencil lead, it's going to be dark, and it is going to make a mess. So we want to kind of use this as our last opportunity to work. What I've done over here is I've set up a couple small sections of people's hair just to show you some samples of it. And one of the things that I will encourage you guys to do as you're working is that if you're working and you're putting your hand down over your face, so this is the corner of his forehead, I'm working on this picture right over here to start with. If you're working on your face and you're putting your hand down over where your face is, you should take a piece of paper and lay it down over your face. So that way you're not dragging your hand over top of your eyes, nose, and mouth. It would really be a tragedy for you to work all that time on that face and then wreck it in the 5-10 minutes that you're gonna do on the hair. So please take a piece of just regular paper, put it down over top of your portrait, and that way, as long as you don't move that paper around, you can move your hand around without smudging it all out. First hair I decided to do over here, it's a tight crop fro. It's not really long hair. It's very textured, and it has a lot of light and shadow on it. And the first thing that we want to do basically is we want to capture a little bit of that light and shadow. We just don't want to just start drawing each and every little curl and each and every strand of hair to start with, but we do want to get a sense of the darkness. Now, for the most part, you know, when people look at your picture, they're going to see that dark area above your face and pretty much consider that it's hair. So all we need to do is pick up on the light and shadow and a little bit of the texture to kind of make people understand what kind of hair, what kind of haircut it is that you have. Now, short hair and like buzz hair and really like fades and stuff like that, they're going to be hard to do to make them look super realistic, but that doesn't change what our job is. Our job is to basically get the base values and then a little bit of a hint of the texture. And even if we don't get every little last strand of hair exactly right, you know, you're still going to be able to get enough information to make people understand what it's supposed to be. So to start off over here, what I did for this particular picture, start off with a base layer of gray. You see the forehead was already done, and when I look at the hair over here, I see that, you know, it's a little bit darker on this end and it gets a little bit lighter on the other end. And all I've really done is shade it in like I've done almost every other part of the face. Then I'm going to come in and sort of blend in a little bit of what I've done with my blending stump. In this case, pretty much just smooth, regular blending, just like I would have done with the forehead. It's just to give me a base layer of color, because when I start doing some of the textures and some of the darker parts, I want you to realize that when I look through onto the head and the hair, I don't see like bright white anywhere in here. I do see some light parts and dark parts, but I don't see any bright white. So I've set up with my base layer. It's a little bit darker than the skin tone, but it's not as dark as I think I'm going to need it. Now, once I have my base layer for a hair like this, I'm going to take a look and I'm going to see like it's got a lot of little textural areas, little sort of bumps and dark parts and light parts. And what I'm doing is I'm starting to fill in some of those areas, and I'm making my marks in the same direction as like the hair is flowing. So I'm not painstakingly going in there and drawing each and every curl and each and every bump, but I am looking for the spots where it is a little bit darker, and you see like up in this area it is darker, and you see some of those darker spots. I'm making those spots in this case in a little tiny circular fashion. Now, the worst thing you can do for a hair like this is fill it in with these little circles and make it look like a pattern. Make it really look really organized and really like, you know, rows and rows and rows. That'll end up making your thing look kind of cartoonish. But you can see what I'm doing is I'm kind of making it into little blotchy spots, and I'm sort of varying where those are. So there is a little bit of a variety of texture. As I get closer to the edge, you can see near the hairline, there's some spots that are just a little bit darker. And again, I'm going to kind of fill in a little bit with that with my pencil lead over here, just kind of making it look like there is a little bit of texture. And even if you look at what I've done so far, even though it's not done, it's already giving you a hint that this is not like one smooth. If you don't do anything other than what I did before, it's going to look like he's wearing like a swimmer's cap on top of his head. It's not what we want. We do want a hint that there is a little bit of light and a little bit of texture. And I'm just going to continue that out through the rest of this, realizing that as I get over to the left-hand side of this, those little textural bumps are smaller and they're lighter. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of lightening up my touch a little bit, and you can almost see a little bit in some of these sections like the waves and stuff like that. So I'm gonna I'm making it up as I go along, but I'm basing what I'm doing on what's in the picture, especially down over here near the edge of the hairline where you can see a little bit more of scalp sort of shining through. So I'm making my little sort of circles, and I'm looking for that little dark ridge that I see in there, making my little circles. And then towards the outside edge over here, the circles are becoming a little bit smaller and a little bit closer together. And again, it's all about hinting at what the information in the picture shows me. Now, with this, am I going to want to blend all this out? Absolutely not. Just like I did with the pencil, I made like little circles. I'm just coming in and I'm blending a little bit of this in. I don't want to get rid of the marks that I'm making on the pencil. Remember that when we did like the forehead and the cheek, the idea was to kind of put down the pencil as smooth as possible so that you wouldn't see any of your pencil marks. In the case of doing the hair, we actually do want to kind of see some of our mark making. We want to leave some of that mark making texture in as hints to what the hair looks like. So we don't want to blend all of that out. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of dabbing it a little bit with my blending stump and sort of just continuing with those little tiny circular marks. So I have like one layer of sort of like the texture of the hair, and now all I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and really kind of look for where is it just a little bit darker. And I'm going to add those darker little marks. And as I'm doing it again, I'm doing sort of erratic marks, little circles, filling in throughout all those areas, again, just to build up the texture of the piece. And in this case, I'm not really going to come back in and blend any of this at this point. Once I've blended my sort of two base layers, my first layer and then my second layer where I go a little bit darker and add a little more texture, this third time around, I'm really not going to go in there and sort of blend that out. So all I'm doing here is just adding a little bit more information, a little bit of these like little circular curly Q marks, and just adding a little bit more to it. Now when you look at the photograph, when you look at the picture and you look at his drawing, you're going to see, okay, the top of his head, I see darkness, so that's going to be his hair, and the little bit of mark making and texture that I left is going to give me enough information to understand, okay, it's a close crop haircut, it's cut pretty tight, and it's sort of faded on the sides. It gets a little bit lighter and a little darker. So that's really all we're going to have to do. Now, I could go over this a few more times and spend about, honestly, 15 more minutes working on this area, but this is just to give you a little idea of what we're going for and what we're trying to get for a hairstyle like this. I'm going to move on now to hair that in the picture is going to be very much pulled back on the head. It's going to look really, really dark, and we're not really going to see a whole lot of texture or value on that. For this one over here, I've already drawn a little bit of just the forehead that was there. I'm going to switch my picture up. And I'm going to be working on this one. All right, so just, sorry about that. Move this over. Okay, so when I'm working on this one, what I see in the photograph is, okay, there's a little shadow on the forehead. This is a little bit of the eyebrow that's up in here. And then the rest of this hair is all really, really dark. It's so dark that it just looks like it's black in the picture. What I would tell you on this one is we want to kind of not just color it in black, but we do want to hint, even though the photograph doesn't have it, that there is some texture in this hair, that there is some sort of actual flow to the hair. So just like on the last one, I'm going to kind of come in and just start with a little bit of a base layer of gray. And I want to kind of just give this a little bit of the value, because if I do what I'm going to do later on with the texture of this particular hair, it's going to actually be too light. So I want to work on a darker sort of base. So even though the picture doesn't show strands of hair or light that much over there, I don't want to just come in here, shade this black, and then just sort of leave it that way. What's going to happen is it'll look like a swim cap, or it'll look like, you know, just like a, you painted the top of your head black, and that's not what we're going for. We want to show the viewer that it is your hair, it's just slicked back and it's sort of pulled tight to the actual scalp, and that it does have some body to it, and it does have a little bit of flow to it. And again, it's not going to require a ton of information, but it's important that we get this. And even though that's not, I remember I told you in the beginning, don't draw what you don't see. Well, the hair is going to be where we cheat a little bit on that one. So in this case, we have, you know, sort of what we've got as far as that dark layer of hair in there. Now, it's not as dark as I can make it. It's probably a little bit darker on this top end than it is all the way through. Now, to sort of create that effect of hair, I'm going to start making marks. And in this case, my mark making is going to be long and pulled across this. I'm basically filling in with my pencil in the same direction that her hair is flowing. Now her hair is, again, pulled tightly to the scalp, but it still has, if you looked at it in real life and not in the photograph, it still would have a sort of direction in the flow. It's long, it's straight, sort of curves along with this shape. So as I'm filling in this area, you see that I'm making long, sort of dark marks that are, again, moving along in the same direction as the hair. This is not something that I'm going to come back in and blend out. I've sort of set my base layer, and really what I'll look for in the picture is any and all little changes or subtle little changes to light and dark. If I can't spot any, all I'm going to do is kind of fill in with my mark making, so that, again, if someone's looking at this, they can get a hint that, okay, I get it, her hair is straight, it's pulled, it's sort of combed back over here. And then another important element for hair like this is to look for any sort of even little flyaways or even the baby hairs. So, you know, her edges right over here, this is a case where, you know, a guy would do this with a nice sharp pencil, and I would just add a little bit of those marks. Again, you don't have to necessarily copy them, you know, line for line, hair for hair to get this part right, but you do want to get the general direction that they're flowing and sort of going in the picture. So again, you know, I'm, you know, making stuff up, but it's based on a true story. You know, it's based on the photograph that I'm looking at. So, and a little bit goes a long way. The worst thing that you could do with the hair is like overdo it. We don't want to get you in there where you're going to be like copying hair for hair, like carefully getting every last hair in the picture. What we do want is just to get the light and shadow that's in the picture and a little bit of the texture. So you can see the difference between the photograph and my drawing. My drawing over here, it's all dark just like it is in the picture, but I do have a little bit of that mark that's in there. All right, a little bit of that flow that's in there. And I've done a little bit of those little flyaways and things like that. And again, this would be one way to do a very dark set of hair. And in fact, if you see a little bit of texture down over here at the bottom, I can kind of get some of that in with my eraser. And I'll do a little bit more of how to use the eraser to kind of get that. So for hair that's really almost jet black in the picture, you almost want to kind of pretend to create a flow to that hair, and you want to think about what the hair is doing in real life. In this case, it's slicked back and it's pulled. And again, notice that I didn't blend out that second layer. I left it sort of scratchy. I made those long scratchy marks to kind of go in the same direction of the hair. All right, I'm going to switch over to a slightly different one now. The first two that I had, you know, one was kind of tight cropped, the other one was kind of slicked back. This one is a little bit all over the place. It's sort of styled up, but it has a lot of different sort of moves and textures to it. So once again, I'm going to start by shading in here. And I'm going to look to kind of create a base layer. Mark it a little sloppy, but I'm trying to rush so I can do at least 1 to 2 more versions of hair right now. So down over here, it's a little bit darker. I'm going to fill that in. And then we've got the basic mass of hair that's sort of curling up and going in a lot of different directions. So what I'm doing is just for that dark area, it's a little bit lighter up here, a little bit darker down there. I'm just kind of filling all that in with a little bit of my dark gray. And again, I don't want to make it jet black. I also don't want to work on white paper for an area of the hair like this. Again, first layer of hair, or at least for the darkness, I'm just kind of darkening it up. And if I leave it like this, it's just going to look like it's a black cloud or a powder puff on top of his head. Again, I want to kind of get the feel and the mood of the hair itself. So here's where you're going to have to be a little bit creative. You're going to have to kind of think and look even at your own head and see what's happening. In this case, the hair is kind of going in a lot of different directions and changing directions often. Closer to the scalp here, it's a little darker and a little richer. So if you notice, like here in the one before, I made all my marks going in the same direction of the hair. Well, I'm doing the same thing here, except the hair here is going in all different directions. So I'm going to add more marks down here on the bottom, and close to the top I'm going to have a few less ones. But again, I'm giving them a variety of marks, trying to go by what I can make out and what I can see in the picture, and also what you can try to do by looking at the mirror and seeing how your hair moves around. And in this case, it's a little wavy. Some parts are going up this way, some parts are going over that way. But again, it's all about creating enough of the movement and texture of mark making that you're doing on the picture to make it look like hair. Now, the important part of this particular hair is really like these flyaways that are going off in all kinds of different directions. This is where you're going to have to spend just a little bit more time. And, you know, you don't have to copy each and every last strand of hair here accurately, but you do want to get a little hint that, okay, these hairs are, you know, light and individual ones that are sort of getting away from the flock here in a way, that there are parts of these curls that are a little bit sort of darker and a little bit more pronounced. There are little recesses here that are a little blacker and kind of show me a little bit more of the texture. And, you know, they're not short, it's not a short cropped haircut. It does have some waves to it, but I want to make sure that my marks kind of follow at least the spirit of where those waves are going. Now, there are some areas in here where you can see in this sort of all overness of hair where you can see a little bit of light. And if you lose a lot of that light, this is a place where you can kind of take your eraser and as you're working, come back and sort of erase in some highlights. And again, your eraser is not going to be like a pencil point precise, but one of the things you can do is come back and bring in some of the lighter textures that you see in there. And then immediately, if you put a little bit of dark next to those light little eraser marks, they'll make them stand out a little bit more. And again, it's all just about creating the illusion of texture and just giving me enough information as the viewer that I can see and I can get it. Oh, I get it. His hair is kind of like, you know, combed up and sort of wavy and a little bit, you know, sort of out of control, which is what we want to have without sitting there carefully drawing every last hair. So for something that's a little bit more crazy, you can see my marks are trying to sort of emulate what I can make out and what I can see. And again, I'm trying to get a little bit of light and texture. I'm trying to get a little bit of our flyaways. I'm trying to get a little bit of the parts of the hair that are going a little bit in different areas. I'm going to try to squeeze in one more set of hair, and I'll do two more tomorrow. Go to this one. It's another set of sort of long hair. And in the picture, what we're seeing is that it's pretty dark, it's pretty black. So again, first layer, you should do this a lot more evenly and a lot more in control. But I'm rushing. You know, for the one that I'm gonna do of my wife, I guarantee you, if I spend 30 minutes working on just like half of an eyeball, I'm probably going to spend a couple hours on the hair to get every last little bit of it right. But I'm going to be using some of the similar ideas or techniques that I'm showing you right now. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm kind of laying down my dark layer. Again, her hair all seems to be really, really black with the exception of some of the light parts that are right in here. There are some like little light flyaways and things like that, which I'll get to. But I'm making my shading kind of go in the same direction of her hair. It's long and it flows this way. I'm going to go in, I'm going to blend this base layer again in. Again, most of it's really dark. Again, this area here that has a little bit of highlight, I'm leaving it a little bit lighter, but you want a base layer for your hair. From here, we want to think this is long, kind of pretty straight and wavy hair. When I start with my mark making, I want to kind of make long, wavy marks, ones that kind of go in the same direction as the hair. I don't need to have every last hair and strand in here, but what I do want is a little bit of a hint that there's a flow and there's a texture that goes in here. All right, and I'm working on that one part over here. I'm making it relatively dark, but I'm filling in that darkness with this sort of long, flowy mark that I'm doing with my pencil. Here, the hair kind of gets flipped up a little bit near the corner, and I kind of want to, again, I'm not copying every last strand meticulously, but I am copying the sort of flow and sort of motion or direction of the hair, and that's really what I want to get. And I realize that right in here is just, we've got some lighter parts. So this is again where I'm going to grab my eraser. I'm going to try to come in and make some of those lighter little highlights, getting a few of those with my eraser and just kind of creating a little bit of light texture. With your eraser, it's going to be way thicker than it needs to be. So this is, once I erase again, I'm coming back and I'm making some of those dark marks to kind of make the highlights stand out a little bit. And you can see how even with just a few little marks, I've kind of created that little flip where the hair kind of changes over a little bit. And again, I would spend, it looks like I only spent like 4 minutes on this. I would want you to take your time a little bit more with it, but basically this is what we got. We've got the long, flowy kind of hair. It's enough texture, even though it's all pretty dark, it's enough texture to kind of give me a hint that she's got long hair and it's sort of flowing down the side of her face. And then as I get to my sort of finished parts here, this is where I can kind of hint at some of these flyaways. One of the mistakes that I made on these drawings is I didn't erase my grid in the background, which I would tell you, erase those grid lines before you even attempt to do the hair. But again, no one should be doing the hair right now because you should have sent me a photograph of it so I can sort of see where you're at. And maybe even there's a few lone hairs that are coming in over the forehead. I would add the hints at those. And you know, again, the difference between a drawing and the photograph is the photograph, this is all registering as all jet black. Our drawing, we want to give the viewer something to see, something that gives them more information. And why? Because, you know, we're throwing the picture away when we're done. All the people are going to see is the drawing. And with the drawing, we want it to look like, okay, I know what they look like. I know where their face and eyes looks like. I know what their hair is. And each strand of hair doesn't need to be copied like we were doing with the eyeball or the nose, but the hair is still very important in telling people what it looks like. We are at the end of class today. I've got 2 more samples of hair. It was a little bit wavier hair and another tight sort of buzz cut. I'm going to do 3 or 4 demos of hair tomorrow because I know there's a lot of different kinds and a lot of different styles.